Hello and welcome to episode number 31 of the Who Am I podcast with the Southside Church of Christ, where we are looking into our identity as Christians and what it means for our lives in today's world. I am Brian Dill, and here with me, as always, is the magnificent Jackson Wells.
Hello, everybody.
Jackson, you got to ride some roller coasters last week.
Yes.
What is your favorite roller coaster of all time?
Man, my favorite roller coaster of all time would have to be the Diamondback, which is at
Kings Island. Yes.
I can remember when I was in the 7th grade, it had just opened.
Okay.
And I was on this school trip, and I had almost broken my ankle a few weeks before that, and they wouldn't let me ride the roller coaster with my boot on.
Oh.
And I was like, can I take my boot off? And they were like, sure. And so I got to ride the Diamondback with only one shoe on.
Were they afraid it was going to fly off? Is that what it was?
I guess. I don't know.
How bizarre.
It was pretty bizarre, yeah. At that point, there wasn't really a need for me to wear the boot.
Okay.
Just
that's good.
Doctor's orders, kind of,
That's not a need, just doctor's orders.
Yeah, I was fine. Like the night before, I'd been running around in a water park. I was fine. You can't wear a boot in a water park.
Okay,
but
okay.
Yeah. Anyways, Diamondback for sure. Fond memories of that.
That's still there, isn't it?
It is. Oh yeah. What about you?
I don't know. One that I have ridden more than the others was called the Vortex. It's probably not still there.
Was it yellow?
No,
No. They renamed it because you sit in it and you're facing somebody.
No, that was Face Off. This is not at Kings Island.
Not at Kings Island. Okay,
It's a Paramount Park, but it's the one in the Carolinas. It's Carowinds, and it was called the Vortex. And it was a stand-up roller coaster.
Okay.
And we rode that so much.
Yeah.
But it was really fun, in part because the hill wasn't so big.
Yeah.
But you had tons of loops and corkscrews, and you're just flying around and everything, and you're just standing up. I mean, it was just there's a lot of fun.
There's a roller coaster at Kings Island called the Vortex.
Oh, okay.
And it's like an older roller coaster, but
right.
it would have been like one of the first like legit metal roller coasters.
Ah, yes.
And so it's really good, but you can feel a little bit of the age. And like with the Diamondback, it's just smooth,
right,
fast, and I love that one.
All right, well, let's get into this week's episode. All right, so Jackson, as we're talking about this week's episode, what is one of the nicest things anyone has ever done for you?
That's a good question. I've had a lot of people do very nice things for me, and it's hard for me to like think about those things because I can't remember them. I don't know why. But the thing that came to my mind the most recently was my dad had a dragon in his garage, and
a wooden dragon.
They don't have to know that.
Okay.
No. Yeah, and so it was a wooden dragon from church camp that they did a couple years ago, and I asked him if we could borrow it, and he said yes. And not only did he say yes, you can borrow this, I'm gonna come help you install it. I'm gonna come help you take it down when it's time to take it down. And so to be willing to do that for VBS was great, and it was just something I enjoyed. So
cool.
What about you, Brian?
Well, so I was trying to think about it, and like you, I struggled to remember specific incidents. So one of the things that came to mind for me was when I was, I think I was still in high school, and actually I know I was still in high school because of the vehicle I was driving. I was working at a gas station, and I helped close down the store one night, and it had started snowing. And so I am driving back home, but I'm driving my dad's little pickup truck. It was a little Ford Ranger, 1987 or something.
Yeah.
No weight whatsoever in the back, even though it's a rear-wheel drive vehicle.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I get going up a little hill, as I'm driving home, and it just starts sliding off to the side. And I didn't have a wreck or anything, didn't do any damage to the truck, but it just slid off the road into a ditch, and there was no getting it out. I couldn't get it to go either direction. It was just spinning. And so I'm sitting there thinking, all right, what do I do? And I thought, well, I don't have a choice. I got to walk home.
Yeah.
And now it was not a long walk. I bet it would probably been about 3 or 4 miles to walk home, which is not terrible,
not
even
bad,
though
it
it's
is snowing.
at night and it was snowing. So, it would have been a woe is me kind of story.
Yeah, yeah.
But sure enough, like I had just barely gotten out of the truck, and a guy drives up in a much larger 4-wheel drive truck.
Yeah.
And he says, "Hey, do you need some help?" And I said, "Probably not." I said, "This thing is not going anywhere, I don't think." And he was looking around at the tires. He saw where it had been spinning. He said, "Yeah, that's not going anywhere."
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, here, let me take you home." And I was like, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Where do you live?" And I said, not far on Lake Rugby Drive or whatever. And he was like, okay. He's like, "I can get down there." And I was like, "Well, you can just drop me off at the top of the road. You don't have to drive down into the neighborhood because it's hilly."
Yeah.
And I was afraid he might get stuck.
Yeah.
And he was like, "It's no big deal." So he drove me all the way home. And
Do you know who it was?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Just some
That
random
awesome.
guy.
Yeah.
And, saw that, some kid was stuck,
Wow.
didn't know what to do. So it was super nice.
What did your dad say when you got home?
When I told him what happened to the truck, once I said the truck is fine,
Yeah.
it just slid off into a ditch.
Yeah.
Because his immediate thought was, "Oh no,
You
what
crashed."
happened?" Yeah. But they were just glad I was okay and glad I was home, and that somebody had been nice enough to drive me home.
Oh, man. That's great.
Well, as we get into this week's episode, we start talking about the meat of this week's episode. We're actually focused on a very, very, very familiar passage to most Christians, I would think. It's a passage that is in Luke chapter 10, and it's the parable that most people call the Good Samaritan. And Jesus tells this parable after someone has asked, "Who is my neighbor?" Jesus has been talking about the importance of loving your neighbor, and so somebody says, "Well, who really is my neighbor?" And so if you will bear with me, those of you listening to this week's episode, bear with me for just a minute as I kind of summarize the story for us to make sure that we're all on the same page. So there is a man who is traveling between Jerusalem and Jericho, and he is overcome by robbers, and they beat him, and they take everything he has and just leave him for dead on the side of the street. And as the story goes, the first man who walks up is a priest, a Jewish priest, and he sees the man on the side of the road and just kind of moves over to the other side of the road and keeps on going. And then a Levite, who is supposed to be also someone who works in and around the temple and all these kinds of things, a very righteous person, sees this man on the side of the street, goes to the other side of the street, and keeps on going. And so finally somebody stops to help the man, but in Jesus' parable, it is a Samaritan, which is an unexpected twist, I would think, for all the Jews that are listening, that a Samaritan, these hated Samaritans, that's who decides to stop and help this Jewish man. And he doesn't just help him, he puts him on his ride, donkey or horse or whatever, and takes him into the town. He helps take care of the wounds that he has. He puts him up in the hotel for multiple days, and even as he's leaving town, he tells the innkeeper, "Hey, whatever he needs, take care of him, and then when I come back, I'll pay for it," all those kinds of things. Now, after he tells this parable, Jesus then, in verse 36 of Luke chapter 10, says, "Which one of these three do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers?" Of course, the answer that Jesus' listeners come back with is the one who showed him mercy. And that just happened to be the Samaritan.
Do you think that it hurt them to say, like, the one who showed them mercy?
Right. Yeah, maybe so. Since it was a Samaritan.
Yeah.
Oh, those Samaritans.
So most of the times when we talk about this parable, we focus on the Samaritan. We look at the right that he did.
Yes, absolutely.
And he even, like, the fact that we don't know much about the guy who got beat, but, like, there's a chance that he would have hated the Samaritan any other day of the week.
Right. Yes.
And the Samaritan might have known that, and he was still willing to do that for somebody that might have despised him.
That's right.
But today we're going to focus on the men who chose not to do the right thing because they were sidesteppers.
Right.
They were the ones that decided they didn't need to, didn't have time, and we'll get to the excuses here in a second. But they chose not to show love to their neighbor, even though they're the priest and the Levite, the people that are supposed to care the most about people. Yet they were the ones that just walked right on by.
Right.
They stepped over to the other side of the road and just kept on walking.
And don't you think that's why Jesus created the story the way he did? You know, if anybody is going to know the right thing to do, it ought to be a priest and a Levite.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you're talking about guys like the Pharisees, basically, that they know the law, they know how all this works, they know what the law says.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that still chose not to do what needed to be done. And so I think the question that goes through my mind whenever I read this parable or want to talk about this parable is, what kind of excuses do you think they made? You know, what went through their minds as they thought, I don't really need to help that guy?
Well, I wrote down 3 things.
Okay.
One is, and this isn't necessarily something that we would use as an excuse today.
Okay.
Well, we might use it as an excuse
Or
today.
a version of it.
I might become unclean. I'm thinking if it's the priest or the Levite and there's like ritualistic stuff going on.
Oh, okay.
If they stop and touch this man or do something,
Right.
it would make them unclean. And that would be a problem for them and whatever they were about to go do.
Because he's bloodied or something like that. I wonder. Let's see. I wonder what a comparable example like would be for us today.
Today,
you know?
like I
maybe
was,
not unclean in a ritualistic sense, but still
actually,
get dirty.
We were in Louisville, and it was Lads to Leaders, and we were driving, and like we saw there's a pretty good homeless population, pretty large homeless population in Louisville, and like some of the people were. I mean, the only way that I could think to describe it were filthy, and it wasn't anything that they could do to negate that, but that's just the truth of it. And so sometimes people are going to be hesitant to even consider helping somebody because of actual uncleanness. Right.
We're going to have to get our hands dirty, you could say. And you could mean that metaphorically or literally.
Yeah.
Right?
The second excuse is it's a trap.
It's a trap.
It's a trap.
Aha.
Yeah, and this is one that I struggle with today.
Absolutely.
Actually, I don't struggle with it, and people struggle with me not struggling with it.
Oh no. I know where this is going. I have a feeling.
Because this happened, it's been over a year. There was a guy, he looked to be about my grandfather's age, walking down the street, and it was raining, and he was carrying groceries. And I was like, that looks like Papa Joe. And the thought crossed my mind, if that was Papa Joe, what would I want somebody to do?
Right.
And I was like, turn around. I'm going to pick up that guy. And it was like a minute drive to where he was going. But you're the first person I think I've told this to.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because
I know that if I told that to anybody, they'd be like, yes. Jackson, you're going to get shot.
You're going to pick up some random person and they're going to, you're going to be the person laying on the side of the street and needing the help.
But I've heard of, again, the modern version of this is somebody is got their car broken down on the side of the road and there's people and somebody's waving down for help. Right. But there are people off in the distance that are going to
Isn't it sad that that's actually a thing?
That is, yeah.
It is a trap.
It's tough because you want to be able to help, but you're like, is it a trap? Is it not a trap? I don't know. For this one, I think it would probably have been pretty easy to tell that it wasn't a trap,
Right.
Unless they've got
probably
some
unconscious,
really good makeup artists that we don't know about.
But you're right, and not just the trap in the sense that they might put my life in danger, but the trap as in it's a hoax.
Yeah, they don't really need my help.
They don't actually need any help. They're just begging for money, just because they can make more money doing that than getting a real job.
Right.
Those are the kinds of excuses that go through our heads.
Yeah, and then the third excuse that I wrote down, which is the one that I think we can relate to the most, is I don't have time, or simply I don't want to.
Right.
Because we do have time, we sometimes just don't want to. And so, again, I don't know where the Levite or the priest was going in this parable, but
right.
They were convinced that whatever they were headed to was of more importance than this guy who was dead on the road. And maybe it was they needed to get somewhere fast and they didn't have time. But that's...
and that's the thing. I think you said it right there, is that wherever we're headed, whatever it is we're about to do, whatever's next on the schedule is more important in our minds than whatever immediate need this person might have.
Yeah.
And so it's we're not willing to make the sacrifice. We're not willing to pay the costs.
Yeah. And sometimes the cost is time. That's all it is.
Right. Exactly. And we think, my schedule is so busy. It's almost like we think we're too important to end up being late to whatever it is that we're doing, which is very rarely true.
Yeah.
But the reality is that loving our neighbor, remember that's ultimately what this parable is about. That's the question Jesus is answering. Who is my neighbor? Who is the person that I should love enough to do these things for? Loving your neighbor is something that can be costly. Whether it is our time or it may cost us, getting dirty. It may cost us financially in some way. If it's somebody that needs some legitimate help and we can find a way to help them financially, it's costly to love your neighbor.
Yeah.
And we find a way to sidestep that an awful lot.
I mean, and when we do that, I just want you to think about we're talking about cost,
Right.
The price that Jesus paid for us.
Right. Yeah. No kidding. Goodness gracious.
We can't spend a minute driving a guy to his house after he's walking home to get groceries. I don't know. We're so good at we want to save as much as we can of ourselves. And
right.
Love isn't cheap. So.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Let me refer to James chapter 2 real quick. Verses 14 through 16, this is what it says. Let me refer to James 2, 14 through 17 real quick. This is what it says. What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, be warmed and filled," without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. So, I'm imagining the guy that I remember seeing in Louisville. If we had just, rolled in. And regrettably, I guess, we didn't do anything. I don't know what we should have done, but we didn't do anything. But this would have been like us rolling down our window and being like, "Man, we hope you're doing okay." When we had a case of water, some Pop-Tarts, and everything right there that we weren't going to eat, we could have given that to him.
Hope you find what you need.
Yeah, and then drive off when what he needs is literally right there with us.
Right.
That's what it's like. Another equivalent to this entire story that I thought, again, that we could relate to is there's a UK fan whose car broke down. You see a van drive by with the UK flags and they just drive by. And then there goes the team bus. They drive right on by, and you're the number one fan.
Right.
And then the Duke fan shows up. And they don't care that you're a UK fan. But they're willing to stop and take care of you no matter the cost. They're going to be like, hey, you can use my AAA card or whatever. It's no big deal. The person that is willing to do the thing for the person is the neighbor. And then the people that don't, oftentimes is us. And
Right.
we're not willing to admit it.
That's exactly right. So, am I a sidestepper? That's the title of our episode for this week. And, we really hope that everyone who's listening can say, no way, I'm not a sidestepper.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling that most everyone that is listening at least one occasion in their life has chosen not to serve someone else in favor of their own schedule, or in favor of not getting their hands dirty, or in favor of their own wallet or whatever.
Right. A couple Sundays ago, I had to run to Russellville to pick up something, and
It's the dragon, wasn't it?
it was.
Oh,
the
no,
night.
it was the night.
It was
That's
the
right.
night, and where we live, there's a big Amish community, and they're all coming home from church on their bicycles, and I drove by, and there was a spot for me to turn in, right, and this group of people were all huddled around this bicycle, and I was like, what's going on? And so I looked over, and I was like, oh, they either that bike's broken or there's a flat or something. And I was like, I got to go get this night. Because it's for VBS, and I've got to go get it. I'm running out of time for VBS. And then I was like, but they're going to have to walk so far. And so I had this 30-second internal battle.
Right.
And so then
right.
I came up to the next stop in the median, and I was like, I'm turning around, and I'm going to go give these people a ride. And so I turned around, and I roll my window down, and I'm like, y'all just want to throw it in the back and take off? And they were like, no, we're good. And so then I turned, it took me about a minute, and they didn't actually need my help, which is something that I think a lot of people don't realize whenever they are contributing to somebody.
Right.
Sometimes the answer is going to be, no, I don't actually need help. I really appreciate it. But,
right.
Be willing to turn your truck around and go pick somebody up. Because it might make their day a little bit better.
Right.
But for me anyways, there's this, it feels good to help people.
Oh, absolutely.
It feels good to help people.
Yeah.
And even if you're not actually able to help somebody, at least offering.
Right.
And it's not about feeling good. It's about showing love for your neighbor.
Yes. Yes.
Because he might have thrown his bike in the back of my truck and dented the side, and then I would have been really upset that I even offered help, But it's what you do for your neighbor.
That's right. That's exactly right. All right. Well, we are so glad that you took the time to listen to this episode this week, and we hope that this conversation about the Good Samaritan and whether or not we are sidesteppers, we hope that it's something that can help you continue to grow in your faith as you strive toward loving your neighbor more often and more willingly. And so we hope it's a blessing to you as you grow in your identity and as a follower of Jesus. And we pray that you have a blessed day.